Well, there you go. Sometimes things just take a little bit longer, but hopefully we're going to be worth waiting for. It's Otherwise Talking Women and the team today, Hazel Makuzeni and Des Skippers. Going to be talking on the show today about a couple of things. Firstly, between the years of 1810 and 1815, Sarah Bartman, Khoikhoi woman, thought to have been born in the Khamtus River Valley, spent a very troubled period of her short life in London and in Paris, on display, as you'll know, as the Hottentot Venus. Well, little is known about her as a person, but a book called Sarah Bartman and the Hottentot Venus, a ghost story and a biography, reveals a whole lot more about this person. We'll be talking to one of the authors, Pamela Scully, who's an Associate Professor of Women's and African Studies at Emory University in the United States. Then in the other half, Work Diva, how to climb the corporate ladder without selling your soul. We'll be talking, all things being equal, to author Kim Meredith. She's MD of Spectrum Solutions and CEO of the Dealmaker programs company. She lectures both locally in Europe and in the Americas. Plus, we've got 4 copies of her book to give away if you like your information in hard copy, so stay tuned. We'll also be talking to a young woman. She's Lebohang Moshe, who's just stepping onto the corporate ladder, so it'll be interesting to hear what she has to say too. But first up, what's news? Well, a microbicide gel that reduces the risk of HIV transmission has been heralded as a glimmer of hope, but only 30% reduction of risk. It's really only a glimmer at this stage. And the Gender Advocacy Programme has warned women that they should treat the results and the gel with caution, because reducing the risk really isn't preventing it altogether. A 24-year-old Lesotho woman faces charges of attempted murder after pushing her 6-year-old son into the traffic following an argument. Luckily, the boy escaped only with bruises to the tune of hopefully nothing at all. Hopefully, all is now well. Looking abroad, a female Tamil Tiger suicide bomber killed herself and 28 others when she detonated her explosives at a camp for civilians who have fled Sri Lankan's ethnic war. Sure. A teething syrup made in Nigeria and in which engine coolant was found has caused the death so far of 84 babies. And then nature has taken her course on the life of the Italian woman who you may have heard had been in a vegetative state of coma for the last 17 years. With controversy about the ethics of letting her go by removing the feeding tubes dividing the Catholic country in two, she has finally died and is now free from it all. Princess Amira Al Tawil, wife of one of the most high-profile and wealthiest men in Saudi Arabia, says that she knows how to drive and she's very ready to do so just as soon as the country allows women behind the wheel. While 56-year-old Jennifer Figa from Colorado prefers a rather different form of transport, having become the first woman to swim the chilly Atlantic, leaving Cape Verde on January the 12th, it took her approximately 19 days swimming out of a total of 25 to get to the other side of the Caribbean, during which time she saw a pod of whales, turtles, dolphin, plenty of Portuguese men-of-war jellyfish, but luckily absolutely no sharks. And after the controversial Obama girl dolls lookalikes, a Barbie doll has now been made in the likeness of German Chancellor Angela Merkel, which is kind of a strange statement, that one. Well, I think we're going to move straight on very shortly. It's Otherwise.
Otherwise, with Nancy Richards.
Sarah Bartman, the story goes, was born in 1789 in the Khamtus River Valley, where she is buried today. She was taken as a child out of the wilds of Africa to Cape Town and then as a young woman to England and to France, where she died rather before her time. In fact, Saki Bartman, as she became known in the Cape and in London, was born a decade earlier than that, in the 1770s, and she wasn't born in the Khamtus River Valley, but some 50 miles to the north. Well, many misunderstandings have flowed from these rather simple mistakes and from the assumption that historical research in South Africa would yield little knowledge. Well, how wrong can you be? That's the opening paragraph from Sarah Bartman and the Hottentot Venus, a ghost story and a biography. Been written by Clifton Crace and Pamela Scully, who did a huge amount of research both here and in London and in Paris. We spoke to Pamela earlier. She's Associate Professor of Women's and African Studies at Emory University in the United States, and asked her why this book, why now?
Well, much is known about the Hottentot Venus, the icon of sort of hypersexuality in the European racist imagination. And something is known of Sarah Bartman, who was born in the Cape and died in Paris in 1815. But what we began to feel as the sort of early 2000s ran by was that while there was lots of work being done on the Hottentot Venus, there wasn't a lot of work being done on the woman who performed that stereotype, in a sense, on the stages, or was forced to perform that stereotype. And some of the work that was being done on Sarah Bartman, the woman, I felt, in a sense, reversed the kind of the racist underpinnings of much of the work on the Hottentot Venus by saying that here was a woman who was, in a sense, a noble savage who couldn't negotiate the challenges of modernity. And it seemed to me that life in colonial South Africa and in Europe was much more complicated, and that what we needed to do was to write the story of Sarah Bartman in a way that didn't presume that we know her ending was terrible. We know the legacy of racism that was inscribed on her body, but that to truly try to honor her life as a living person who we had to sort of start from the beginning and try to understand her life as she lived it, which was indeed full of trauma and terrible events, but was a life lived nonetheless, not always in the shadow of the Hottentot Venus. So one of the key things we tried to do in the book was to really try to separate the icon of the Hottentot Venus from the person of Sarah Bartman and try to weave those two stories together, which is why we call the book, the subtitle is A Ghost Story and a Biography, because one of the ironies we found was it was easier to write the biography of the Hottentot Venus, where there's a lot of records, there are images from the 19th century, much more difficult, in fact, to write the biography of the living person, Sarah Bartman, but not impossible. So we did in the end feel we had at least attempted to write the biography of Sarah Bartman.
Well, whether it be Sarah Bartman or the Hottentot Venus, either way, she was no savage, noble or
Indeed.
otherwise.
Indeed.
And I think that's perhaps certainly a misconception, just even that title. Just describe to her the sort of person that she was. Maybe in doing that, we can go back to where she was born.
Well, what we discovered was people have thought that she was born around Hankey, which is indeed where she has been buried. But our examination and investigation suggests that she's born much closer to Graafrenet, and that she was born on a farm called Bartmansfontein, which suggested that the area where she was born was already colonized by Dutch settlers, and we were able to track that in quite a lot of detail. She came down to the Cape, was brought down to the Cape really almost as a slave. Again, we've got a different chronology. We have her born in the 1770s, which makes her much older than originally thought, and she comes down to the Cape in about 1795, and so lives in Cape Town up until 1810, when she is taken off to London. And so she lived as a young woman in Cape Town, which we detail in quite a lot of detail. She had, we can say who she had a love relationship with. It was a man from the Netherlands who was in the army.
Was this young Hendrik?
No, this was not Hendrik. Hendrik de Jong, yes, a different Hendrik, indeed. And he left, and then the child died, and it's shortly after that she's forced to go off to London. So we're able to detail her life in the Cape, and it's a complicated life because she lived almost as an urban slave in the household of the Cesars. But because it was an urban setting in Cape Town, people had more freedom of movement. So we know that she lived in Hout Bay for a while, came back into Woodstock where the Cesars lived. In London, it's very difficult to say. I mean, I don't feel ever comfortable saying this is what Sarah thought, or we can't really say what kind of person she was as an individual.
Just before we get her to London, because she lived quite a lot of her life here in South Africa.
She did.
I think she was 30-odd when she went.
Indeed.
So as I say, she was no savage. I mean, she may have been a slave, but she had been in and around, quite sort of classy places. She spoke a number of different languages.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and that's one of the things we talk about in the book, is that the irony is that by the time she goes to England, even just to England, she's speaking a bit of English, certainly Dutch, her natal language. She's lived in Cape Town, a very, very cosmopolitan city of the world at that time. She was an acculturated woman who was able to speak to many different worlds. And one of the points we do make when she goes to London is that when she was taken to London by Hendrik Cesar and Alexander Dunlop, they could have actually, Alexander Dunlop, who was the major mover and shaker in this show of the Hottentot Venus, could have presented her as a quote-unquote converted Hottentot. He could have presented her as a miracle of missionary conversions, and there were many people brought from South Africa as people who had been converted to Christianity, who were civilized, etc., etc., etc. And he chose rather the Hottentot Venus because I think he thought that was the way he could make money. And that's what we try to distinguish, as your question suggests, between the image of the Hottentot Venus, of the savage woman who couldn't possibly be beautiful because she was a Hottentot, from the woman Sarah Bartman. And that's also why, for our cover, I really insisted and asked if we could please have her portrait on the cover of the book, because what you see there is a very beautiful woman staring out at history. You don't see the Hottentot Venus. I think you see Sarah Bartman.
And she herself was actually agreed to go. She wasn't dragged along either.
Yes, that is true. I think it's probably too strong to say that she agreed to go. Basically, Alexander Dunlop forced her employer, or her owner, depending on your view, Hendrik Cesars, to go, because Hendrik Cesars was in debt, and he basically had to go because he was either going to go into prison or he was going to go off to England to make money. And Alexander Dunlop said, we want to take Sarah Bartman. And Sarah said, I will not go unless Hendrik Cesar goes. So she was able to put conditions on her move. Whether she was in a condition, in a position to refuse exactly, I think it's pressing it too far. But clearly, what we're trying to show is to show the negotiations that happen even in context of domination. Because if we're going to say that people who live lives in servitude have no agency whatsoever, we're really refusing them any real humanity. And it's not to say it's not a struggle, and it's not to say she was free. So I don't want that to be either the story of Sarah Bartman was that she chose to go to London, but that it is a deeply complicated and complex story that one's telling.
And I think if I've got it right, I think she also said something to the effect of, what is there for me here? So there was no reason for her to stay. I mean, life was pretty ghastly for her here.
Well, and indeed, if you think from the position of being in Cape Town, where she had lost 2 children, where her partner had moved, and she was indeed, she lived in conditions of servitude. London probably didn't feel that bad. I mean, the British, certainly for the Gonaqua, her society, had been people who'd come and to some extent helped them against the Boers. So Britain had this different kind of resonance in South Africa at that time. And so London probably didn't feel so terrible. Now, that doesn't mean that either she or Hendrik Cesar fully understood what London would mean to either of them. And I think London, and indeed Paris, turned out to be a much, much more vicious experience than they imagined.
Just going back to her as Sarah Bartman as opposed to the Hottentot Venus, did she ever find any sort of joy for her soul in London? Was it all awful?
It's really very hard to say.
She just gave the one interview when she was there, didn't she?
Exactly, and that interview was done in the context of a court case. And one of the things that's interesting about this story is that the conventional story, and indeed the story in London at the time in 1810, was that the bad person in the story was Hendrik Cesar, the nasty man who brought her to London. And that's a much more complicated story because he himself was designated free black in the Cape. He was denied access to loans as a person of slave descent. And really the move and shake in the story is really Alexander Dunlop. But in the interview, what the court decided when they interviewed Sarah Bartman was that they had to get rid of Hendrik Cesar. And so they made sure that he was not in the room when they interviewed Sarah Bartman about how she felt about being in London, whether she was enslaved or not. But they left Alexander Dunlop, the man who was actually in charge, sitting behind her. And so that renders the whole context of the interview very, very problematic in terms of revealing any kind of revealed truth about what she really thought. And again, it's also ironic, and maybe it's ironic that this is a place, but she really, in a sense, disappears in the records for much of 1811, and then she appears again, and then she disappears. And we've tracked various travelling fairs, and there are advertisements about the Hottentot Venus that appear here and there, which suggest that she was on the county fair circuit, particularly in the summer of 1812. And we suspect there, where you had lots of people being displayed and displaying themselves in a variety of settings for entertainment, that not to say that it was nice to do the display of the Hottentot Venus, but that possibly in the evenings, chatting to the giant or the fat woman or the fat man or whatever, again, all of these presentations for a show, maybe there she just was able to become a regular person performing a part.
Sounds like there may have been some sort of camaraderie amongst them.
Exactly. But that might well be wistful thinking, because she was, of course, indeed always a black woman in England when there were very few black women. There was a big black population, but very few black women in England at that time. And so that even there, it's probably wistful thinking to think that she was, ever able really entirely to escape the icon of the Hottentot Venus.
From that one interview, were there any clues at all as to her personality, as to her thinking?
I find that interview so constrained. I don't know. She did talk. I mean, I would say there was some longing there for her family, her brothers and her sisters. She did talk about being able to ride around in a coach on Sundays in the park with two little black boys to look after her, and we've been able to trace them. We think that they were actually slave boys taken illegally by Alexander Dunlop from the slave lodge in Cape Town, because he was a slave surgeon there. But that this rendering of riding in a coach with children attending her, I think also spoke to a sort of maybe a desire to be part of respectable society in London, where the elites would in fact do that, on the weekends. But I think really she, in so many ways, she is a very elusive figure in history, and I think that's why, but one of the reasons we wrote this book is that biography tends to be written about people who are elite, famous, left diaries, left records, and so for people like Sarah Baartman, who were forced to live on the margins of history because of race, colonialism, genocide, etc., and gender, they have largely not been the subjects of biography. And we thought that even if at the end she remains an elusive figure on some level, it was really important to attempt to take her life really seriously.
You've sort of pieced her together through her surroundings and as things were, exactly, and you sort of created her out of this sort of like alchemists. Mm-hmm. And her last stay, of course, was in Paris. Were things any better there?
No, I would say they were definitively worse. Because in England, I think precisely because she comes at a particular moment, there was a history of side shows, freak shows, of which the Hottentot Venus was a part, actually a very popular part, but it was certainly embedded in a kind of racist, emerging ethnographic spectacle. And I think why she's important in England is precisely because I think the showing of the Hottentot Venus merges an older showing of freaks and freak shows into something racist. There were still open-ended possibilities, whereas in Paris she arrives and everybody knows about the Hottentot Venus. They have no doubt who she is. And I think if there was separation between Sarah Baartman and the icon in England, by the time she gets to Paris, people cannot see her as anything different. And I think she's sold to an animal trainer, really displayed in terrible conditions. I think if I feel more sort of tenuous about how she may or may not have experienced England, I think her experience in Paris was not good. Not good at all.
And even in her death, there was no rest, was there?
Indeed, because Georges Cuvier, who was the founder of comparative anatomy, had examined her in March 1815, which is where we actually get the portrait of her, because he had people paint her. But she refused, and again, that refusal I think we have to really take seriously. He wanted to see her genitals, and she refused. And I think that's speaking truth to power, that she just said no to this very important scientist in his laboratory. I think if one's looking for Sarah Baartman, something speaks to history there, that this woman said no. But on her death, Cuvier petitioned the Commissioner of Police to have her body in order to do an autopsy. But of course it wasn't to do an autopsy to see why she died. We still don't know, in fact. There are too many conflicting reports. It was to do an autopsy to examine her as a specimen of nature and to see if, in fact, she was a missing link between mankind or humankind and the animal world. And so, but one of the things about our book is that's where people have generally left the story of the Hottentot Venus, and we thought it was very important to talk about the importance of the politics of her return back to South Africa in 2002, but also the larger politics in South Africa around the ending of apartheid, the emergence of a democratic state, the new identities being invented and reclaimed from the past, the indigenous rights movement, the struggle over how she should be buried, and how different constituencies felt about that. And then finally, we also thought it was really important to not only end with her sort of her burial and in return in that way, but to actually show how the story of Sarah Baartman is part of the larger story of South Africa. So we end with her descendants and what stories, accounts of their lives from about 1834 up until the present. To situate her back into familial stories of Baartmans in South Africa that doesn't leave her floating like this icon outside of history.
And finally, I think she was reburied back in South Africa on Women's Day.
She was, and I think... and again, I think, as usual, the closer one looks, the more complicated it gets, because I think there were women who had tried had been very important in managing to get Sarah Baartman's remains returned, who were really very crucial, and I think they felt that they would like Sarah Bartman to have been buried according to at least some gestured Khoi customs, with the moon in the right alignment in particular ways. And that didn't happen because she was by then a national icon, and so she then became part of a kind of a national reimagining of South Africa. And so I think there are tensions. I mean, on the one hand, it's fantastic that she was buried on National Women's Day. It celebrates her, it honors her. I think there's also some sadness that women who tried really hard to bring her home didn't maybe feel quite as good about that as might have been the case.
And now?
And now?
Do you feel that your book has laid it to rest appropriately?
I think it's our attempt to do so. I don't think one can ever say, that it's the final word or anything like that. And there's so much work being done still on, I live in America, and here we have a wonderful project called the Saki Project, which is based, I'm not part of it, but which is based in Washington, D.C., where African-American women are working through issues of the body and sexuality and racism, and they have performance art, and they call it the Saki Project in honor of Sarah Bartman. So I suspect the work and that gets done in Sarah Bartman and the Hottentot Venus will continue for many years. But we tried. We tried to say something new and to honor the person as well as to talk about the endurance of the icon.
Pamela Scully, and she's co-author of Sarah Bartman and the Hottentot Venus, published by Wits University Press. You're listening to Otherwise, and next up in the other half, talking about the work diva and the beginner. But first up, it's time for the news headlines at 1:30 with Kumbuzile Tabete.
Thank you, Nancy. Good afternoon. SABC News has reliably learnt that President Kgalema Motlanthe will announce an election date this afternoon. That's when he'll reply to a debate in Parliament on his State of the Nation address. SATAW General Secretary Randall Howard says they have evidence to back up claims against SAA head Khaya Nqula. This after SATAW handed a dossier of complaints to the Public Enterprises Department. Johannesburg Metro Police spokesperson Wayne Minnaar has apologized for the inconvenience that the Metro officers' week-long strike has caused to people who could not go for their driver's license tests. He says the department will contact all those that are affected to reschedule their tests. And further afield, Australia's Prime Minister Kevin Rudd has told members of Parliament that areas devastated by the worst bushfires for decades will be rebuilt. The death toll has risen to more than 180. I'll have details of these and other stories at 2.
But right now you're listening to Otherwise Talking Women here on SAFM. And up next, climbing the corporate ladder without losing your soul. A work diva and a beginner will be on the show just now. The Foschini Group of companies is not only about fashion and looking good, they're also committed to doing good. You may have heard their 16 Days of Activism campaign with Otherwise. Through their CSI programme, they also support projects in the areas of education, skills development, HIV and AIDS, and arts, culture and environment for the benefit of women and children. For information on what and how they fund, visit their website. It's www.foschinigroup.co.za/CSI. Born in a Taxi, that's Black Sunshine. And you're listening to Otherwise, we're talking women. Well, I don't know what stage you're at in your career or what business you're in, but I suspect that you might well find some rather useful hints and advice in a book called Work Diva, how to climb the corporate ladder without selling your soul. Kim Meredith is the author, and she has a degree in clinical psychology, postgraduate in didactics and adult learning, and she's also had, from the sounds of it, a pretty intense career and has created something called the Dealmaker. Well, we'll be getting some advice from her in just a minute. Plus, we're going to be giving away 4 copies of her book. So if you want one, I'm going to give you the number later on. But first up, someone who is at the starter rungs of the business ladder, she's Lebogang Moshe, 21-year-old graduate from the Vega School of Brand Innovation in Johannesburg. And she's just started an apprenticeship at the Jupiter Drawing Room. I think she's in a work readiness workshop right now, but we've dragged her out. She came originally from the Northwest Province, and I think her plan is to climb some sort of corporate ladder, but we've got her on the line. Hi, Lebogang.
Hello, how are you?
I'm excellent. How are you doing?
I'm okay, thank you.
Good. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing right now.
Okay. I've been employed at the Jupiter Drawing Room as an apprentice account executive.
Okay.
Yes.
So how does that make you feel? I mean, are you sort of thinking, oh my word, here I go? Are you nervous? Are you excited, apprehensive? What?
I was nervous when I started for the first 2 weeks, but I happen to find that the advertising industry, or rather the company that I'm in right now, it's a very friendly environment, and you're welcome to ask questions and be free. So there's a lot of room for growth, and that is one thing that I like and enjoy.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about your journey to get to this stage of the ladder then. You were studying at the Vega School of Brand Innovation. What were you actually studying there?
Oh, basically our core was advertising and marketing. Yes, we were in that program for a whole year, and we had to go for a 3 weeks internship last year. So obviously you have to make an impression, and if they like you, they'll call you and say, come and work for us for a certain, say maybe 2 months or so.
What part of that the area of industry did really appeal to you?
I fell in love with advertising, and when I went into Vega, I was interested in going into art direction. Yes. So I went into art direction, and it was a bit intense for me. So I thought, if I want to get that insight into the advertising industry, then I think that accounts management would be it, because you know the ins and outs, you know how to deal with clients and how to communicate with people. So I went into accounts management, and I'm loving it. I enjoy it.
Gosh, well, you're obviously a bit of a natural, because very often what happens, in fact, I think they describe you guys as gutsy, curious and grounded. So that's pretty good. But the thing about you, once you've been studying and you think you've got it and you've graduated and you think you know it all, and then you get into the workplace and you suddenly realise that everybody else knows a whole lot more than you do. Have you had that sense of, oh my word, I'm out of my depth?
Oh, yes, of course. It's very challenging, because you go into the company and everybody knows so much, and you even shy to utter a word because you're not sure if what you're going to say is appropriate with what they're talking about. You're not sure. So it's very challenging, but you have to have confidence in yourself and do a lot of research and find out what is happening out there.
Yeah, and not be afraid to ask questions. We're just about to talk to the author of a book called Work Diva, and in it she says that never, ever, ever say that you understand something if you don't. So you have to be prepared to sort of say, listen, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about, explain.
Exactly, yes.
What's it like working with the other people? Can you see yourself climbing to the top of this particular ladder?
Of course, like I said earlier on, there is a lot of growth there. You can see currently, I see myself as an AE, but I plan to study further and go probably become a director.
Director? Nothing small about your goals then?
No.
Are there any of the people there who you could sort of see as like a role model, somebody that you think, that's cool, that's how I'd like to be?
Oh, yes. Currently, there's a woman mentoring me, and she's a brilliant woman. I have no fear to ask her anything, and she's just great. And yes, we get given Mukari, those people that I have read a lot about when I fell in love with advertising. And yes, I look up to those such people.
When you say she's mentoring, what advice has she given you so far that has really worked for you?
Excuse me?
What sort of advice, I mean, as a mentor, what sort of advice has she given you so far that it's really meant something for you?
Oh, it's basically the daily runnings of being an accounts executive, and most importantly, your personal etiquette, how you uphold yourself in front of clients, in front of people.
So, I mean, has she sort of said to you, Lebo, that's not the way you do it, this is how you do it, or, you know?
Oh, yes, that is why I'm saying she's a remarkable woman, because I thought that she would just keep quiet and say, let me be. But when I'm doing something wrong, she'd tell me that, no, not exactly if I'm doing something wrong, but she'd tell me that next time, try to go about it in a different way.
Well, Lebo, I wish you every success on your climb up that corporate ladder, and may there be directorship right at the top of it.
Oh, thank
Fantastic.
you very much.
Thanks a lot. Good luck.
Thank you.
Lebo Hang Moshe starting off on her journey there. She's just graduated from the Vega School of Brand Innovation in Johannesburg, and it certainly sounds like she's got far to go.
My dad's a builder, and he can pick up a wheelbarrow with his little finger. Well, my dad is a fireman, and he drives a big red fire truck. Yeah? Well, my dad's an actor, and he's been on TV. Well, My brother's only in grade 8, but he works 2 jobs to look after me and my sisters.
Many AIDS orphans are faced with parenthood before adulthood. Let's have the conversation. SAFM, South Africa's news and information leader.
Where we're talking about women right now. In fact, we're talking about women in the workplace. Work Diva is the name of a book called, and subtitled, How to Climb the Corporate Ladder Without Selling Your Soul. And we have in our Johannesburg studio, we have the author, Kim Meredith. Hi, Kim.
Hi, Nancy.
Very nice to have you with us. And you've got some wonderful quotes in here, which I've been sort of chuckling over as I've been looking through. But tell us, let's start with the title, Work Diva. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's a bit of a corruption of a program I developed for women in business called the Diva. And when I was approached by Ocean Books to write this book, they really liked the title and thought it would be appropriate for the book itself. So that's where it comes from. I wish I could say it was some greatly imaginative part of mine, but it wasn't.
Okay, well, we'll buy that. It's a very jolly cover anyway. So the Deal Diva, tell us a little bit about the Deal programs that you've devised.
I worked all over the world, working with business people, men, women, all ages, races, creeds, nationalities. And over the period I worked with them, I discovered that women weren't doing as well as men in business. And
what was your first clue?
Well, the salary thing.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Having that firsthand. But, and as part of developing the programs to take people to the next level of deal making, I actually thought, hold on, there's a place for a program for women that addresses their specific challenges and issues. And that's where the Deal Diva program came about. So it's an offshoot of the Dealmaker programs, which were the original set of programs. But those are for people in business in general, not specific to women.
So you're saying that a woman should make a deal in a different way to a man?
Well, not necessarily. I think women approach deals differently. Let's just take the salary example. Women are often so grateful just to be offered the job that they don't feel they're in a position to negotiate the salary. And I think after decades of not negotiating, businesses got used to paying women less, and we have allowed ourselves to fall into that trap. And it's really to help women to value themselves more, and then to structure how they present if they're going to negotiate a salary, for example, how they go about presenting that and maximizing what they should be getting paid for their job.
Yes, without and sort of going at it without appearing to be pushy. We had this very debate on the programme just the other day, and it was very interesting. It does seem that, as women we have to learn better negotiation skills if we want to be paid better. Yeah. But the other thing is that, just talking of negotiation, we're actually giving away 4 copies of your book. So if anybody would like a copy, what they have to do. We'll think about what they have to do, but what we're going to do, I'm going to give you the number. Actually, no, I'm not, because first of all, we have to think about what we're going to ask. But while we're busy thinking about what we're going to ask, I'll give out the number in just a minute. Let's just go back to the quotes that I was mentioning right at the beginning of the book. You've got a quote by Pablo Picasso who says, "There are only 2 types of women, goddesses and doormats." Hey. You also go on to sort of say that if you don't know who Pablo Picasso is, please don't tell anyone. Google the name before you even begin to read the rest of this book. What are you saying by that? Are you saying that knowledge is power, that you've got to know stuff?
Yeah. I was interested in your last conversation with Lebo. You mentioned to her that she should ask if she doesn't know something. And there's 2 ways to find things out. You either read or do the research or ask somebody. And it's just encouraging women. In my comment about if you don't know who Pablo Picasso is, just encouraging women to take the initiative to go and get the information they need from whatever source they can, whether it's off their own bat, going Googling, or it's going and finding somebody who knows the answer. But yeah, sure, that quote is a little one-dimensional, well, 2-dimensional. I mean, you can be 1 or 2. But I think for me, it epitomized women's approach to business. They allow themselves to be trodden on when they shouldn't. And it's just elevating the way they view themselves. And that was why I liked that particular quote. I'm sure there are much more eloquent quotes than that one. But it just said, don't stop diminishing yourself. Start viewing yourself with different eyes, and people will see you differently.
Yeah, because you can. The other quote, which I think possibly is more sort of positive, is by Oprah Winfrey. It's the greatest discovery of all time is that a person can change his, presumably her, future by merely changing his or her attitude. Yeah. And I think think that's probably really where we're going with this, is that it's up to, as a woman, it's up to you, really, isn't it? If you change your attitude, you can deliver.
It is. The reality is, in business, women do have a hard time. I can't pretend it's all equal and wonderful, and the battle of the sexes has been won, and women are treated the same as men would be treated. That's not the case, and hallelujah. I mean, we don't want to all be treated the same. But it is about seeing yourself in a different light and not allowing people to put you down. I mean, just last week I had a conversation with somebody, a man who was so patronizing and diminishing. No matter how much I've achieved in my life, it didn't matter. That person I had the conversation with thought they were entitled to speak to me like that because I'm a woman. So it doesn't matter, you're going to encounter that sort of nonsense wherever you are in your personal life, your business life, but it's the only thing that can protect you from it really is the way you view yourself. And that's what I wanted to work with the Work Diva, was just encourage women to see themselves more positively, but also to take responsibility for their own climb up the corporate ladder.
Yeah. I think now's the time to give away the details of how one can win one of the copies of your book, The Work Diva, How to Climb the Corporate Ladder Without Selling Your Soul. It's been written by Kim Meredith. And what you have to do is tell us, what is the name of the program that she has founded? We mentioned it earlier. What is the name of the program that she has founded? Then give us a call on 0892 10 20 10. 0892 10 20 10.
Please pass the popcorn.
Huh? What?
The popcorn.
What? I can't hear you.
Please pass the popcorn.
Popcorn? What popcorn? All we have is pop.
Your TV license fee helps us bring you the best local Valentine's Day programming possible. It's not just paying a TV license. It's captivating the nation. Pay yours. Make a difference.
Ish! This is a cool car, bro.
Yeah, boy, I collected it yesterday from the garage.
Yeah, can I test drive it to see its performance?
Yeah, sure.
Let's go.
Hey, don't drive so fast. Jeez. Hey, Bona, you beat the robot. Hey, look out, man.
Speed kills. Arrive alive. Sivuthumlilo on our roads. Mpumalanga, a pioneering spirit.
You're listening to Otherwise Talking Women, and right now we're talking about a book called Work Diva, How to Climb the Corporate Ladder Without Selling Your Soul. It's written by author Kim Meredith, who, interestingly enough, also was at one time a clinical psychologist, or certainly has a degree in clinical psychologist. Kim, is clinical psychology, have you found it to be quite useful in the sort of work that you're doing? Yes,
perhaps. Not really. I got into the business world before I had a degree, and my first mentor said to me that if I studied, the doors would open more easily for me. So I just went off to UNISA and I chose subjects I thought I would enjoy. And no, I've never practiced as a clinical psychologist. That was my major for my degree. But it was interesting, so it made the studying fun. I think women have insight anyway, whether they have the clinical psychology degrees or not. So that always stands us in good stead. But it just made having to work and study at the same time more tolerable.
Did your mentor say anything else to you? It was interesting talking to Lebohang there, how Lebohang sort of fondly thought that the woman who's mentoring her might sort of let her be and just go her own way. But actually she is there all the time. Anything that your mentor said to you that changed your approach?
I've had several mentors, but the most influential was very early on in my career. And the most amazing thing about him was he encouraged me to start a business on the side while I was working for him. But he did say to me that, it could never interfere in what he expected from me in a work environment, which was 24/7. Mm-hmm. But he helped me, encouraged me. He said entrepreneurship was one of the most important lessons I had to learn. Now, whether he wanted everybody that worked for him to learn that particular skill, I'm not sure. But certainly he saw it in me and thought I had the ability to do my own thing. But it took me 10 years. I worked for him for 10 years before I started working for myself. So I was incredibly blessed to have this man guiding me.
Sometimes people do say things like that. It's interesting. I mean, it sounds like he was saying push yourself just a little bit harder. In other words, bite off more than you can chew and learn to chew harder. And sometimes when you're looking for sort of sympathies, people sometimes say, well, you just got to do better. I remember somebody once saying to me, you've just got to organise yourself better. And I remember thinking, but I took it on, and I thought maybe it's true. You do have to just sort of work that little bit harder.
It would have been useful if they'd given you a few pointers on how to organise yourself better.
But they did.
Oh, okay.
But I am still learning nonetheless. We've got our winners, incidentally.
Oh, great.
And the book, Work Diva, How to Climb the Corporate Ladder Without Selling Your Soul, is published by Ocean Books. And our winners are Fatima in Johannesburg, Angela in Durban, Leonard Mavuso in Nelspruit, and Mrs. Landon in Cape Town. Well done to you all, and those books will be coming to you very soon. Kim, I just want to go back to the substance, the content of your book, and I use that word substance advisedly because you talk about work diva of art and substance, and we all know that book, Woman of Substance. And you've got 10 pointers on which you said, I don't know if you've got the book with you, but you've got 10 pointers on how yourself can become establish credibility and earn respect, because unless you are credible and have other people respect you, you're never really going to get anywhere. Can you remember what any of them are, or can I read some out to you? And
read them with pleasure.
Okay. Well, the first one is under promise and over deliver. Just explain that.
I think what's really important in climbing the corporate ladder, and this isn't specific to women, is that, people think it happens easily and you just get lucky. That does happen to a few people, but essentially it's hard work that's going to pay off. Don't say you can do something if you can't. Rather, set expectations on what you can deliver and then push yourself to deliver more than the expectation you've set. People are always disappointed if you say, I can do that, and then you don't quite come up to scratch. So, a lot of what in those 10 pointers, a lot of what I'm saying there is about hard work and pushing yourself that extra mile. If you're really serious about getting to the top, luck isn't enough. It is about dedication, commitment, and taking on stuff, maybe studying part-time, that is a stretch for you. But that's the best way to earn people's respect. But part of it is you've got to have that respect for yourself, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's another one where you say work hard and work smart. I suppose work hard but work smart, because there's no good driving yourself and working like a beaver and everybody is knocked dead impressed because you're in at 7 and out at 7. You've got to really, work efficiently, especially if you've got other family commitments.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people don't know how to work smart. They do more of the same. And
how do you work smarter?
Well, it depends on what field you're in, but I think if you're not sure how it should be done, go to somebody who you admire and ask them if they can give you any pointers, much like the advice I think you were giving Lebo in the last call. But just get that input. Sometimes we just can't see a way of doing things better ourselves, and getting other people's input and guidance. And it doesn't have to be somebody more senior than you. It could be somebody whose opinion you respect that works with you or even for you, that you just say, hey, have you got any ideas on how I could do this better?
Yeah, absolutely. So don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah.
Another two that kind of go hand in hand. One is be consistent and keep your word. And I think you alluded to the keep your word thing. I mean, if you're going to say, yeah, I'll do that, you really have to do it.
Yeah, it's really important for me. Maybe that's a personal one. It's also how I measure other people's commitment, is if they say they're going to do something by a certain date, I expect them to. But I also give them enough latitude to get on with it. So I'm not good with people I have to micromanage. So that one comes up maybe a little bit more from the way I conduct business.
Do you think, interesting that you stopped there, but do you think a lot of what you say, and it's interesting that one of our winners, Linda Mavuso, is a man, presumably, that a lot of what you're saying here really, really does refer to women, because one of the other pointers here is say what you mean and mean what you say. Get to the point, you say. In business, nothing is more irritating than someone who dithers or uses 50 words when 15 would suffice. Do you think that as women we tend to do that?
It differs from woman to woman. It's, I am generalizing. But also the be consistent thing. I think women bring a lot more emotional baggage to the workplace than men do. And you can't be up one day and down the next. And sulky and not communicative the one day, and
even
verbose
though
the other,
PMT or PMS might be leading you there, you've got to.
You still have to manage it. It's it's not an excuse in the workplace if you say, "Oh, I've got this terrible bout." It's not good enough. The people you work with are going to want you to be able to manage that, even though it's hormonal, and there's not that much you can do about it.
Just get on with it, really.
Yeah.
Just get more organised. Tell the truth despite the consequences.
Yeah. That's a personal favourite of mine, but mostly because I'm really, really bad at lying. I can't remember lies I've told. And in telling the truth, sometimes there are consequences that are unpleasant, but it's always served me well. If I can do something, I say I can. If I can't do something, I say I can't. For example, when you introduced me, you said my postgrad degree, I think, I did studies in adult learning, in didactics. I didn't do a degree. I'm worried now that, of course, I think that's not the truth. I'm going to become like Dolly Parton in that movie Straight Talk.
I'm so sorry, my sincere apologies.
It's the way I think I wrote it. So I just wanted to clarify there's going to be somebody who'll check up and say, hold on, she's lying to me.
Well,
it's so important to me.
It's the way your publicists have put it over, which is another lesson, isn't it? Yes. Anyway, you're forgiven because we now you've been totally and utterly honest. And just time for not quite the last one, but certainly one that I think is terribly important, is treat others with respect. Because I think what you're really saying is, you can't expect to get any respect unless you are dishing it out as well.
Another facet of that is if people respect themselves, they usually treat other people with respect. The two seem to go hand in hand, but you can't demand respect. It's earned.
So first respect yourself, and then all the rest will follow.
Mm.
We're talking about climbing the ladder. Are you still on the ladder? Or have you got there? Are you busy on your way down? I mean, or are you trying to find another ladder?
I have 2 businesses of my own now that I run, and I think that's the ladder that gives me the most satisfaction, is actually having the say. If I had to go back into the corporate world, I don't think I would take that top job because the price you pay is so high.
Ain't that the truth? Work Diva, thank you so much. Kim Meredith, author of Work Diva, How to Climb the Corporate Ladder Without Selling Your Soul, published by Ocean. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Nancy.
Tomorrow on the show, rather shortened version, we'll be talking about how to get pregnant. It's an account of the budget speech. That's it for the day today. Next up, it's time for the news at 2 with Kumbuzile Tabete.